today at the Rogers Public Library for our Lunch and Learn. Would you please just give a warm welcome to Feleccia and Don Ray from the Renaissance Fair of the Ozarks. We're so happy to have them here with us today.
It sounds like we may not have photographs, which is sad because I just spent all last night putting together photographs for you. So you're just going to have to look at me and hopefully imagine with me. That's not such a bad thing though, because what we do with the Renaissance Fair is we try to recreate a historical period. We try to, by dressing up and learning the language and putting on the customs and behaviors, spark imagination in our patrons and especially in children. In this day and age, I don't know if you've heard in the news, they have proposed cutting funding for the AP history classes in Oklahoma. This is in order to put the school's money on what they feel is more important. Now, that sounds a bit like history is not as important as science, which couldn't be farther from the truth. However, science does require more equipment. So I understand that. We make up the slack for that by teaching children history in a way that is visually striking, entertaining, sometimes full of juggling and fire, sometimes just funny enough that they will go look it up to find out more. But education through imagination is what we do. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to have pictures, so let me just start. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am an artist. I paint portraits. I'm a seamstress. I make the dress that I'm wearing today. I made what my husband is wearing.
Except for this.
Except for what? Oh, the chain of state, yes, was made by a Renaissance vendor, a shopkeeper, a craftsperson who took eggshells and created these pieces that we use for jewelry. Now, I've performed at the Oklahoma Renaissance Festival in Muskogee, Oklahoma, at the Kansas City Renaissance Festival in Kansas City, and here lately at the Renaissance Fair of the Ozarks in Fayetteville.
Hello.
This is my husband, Don.
Hello.
Hi, Don.
And how are you doing today?
Perfect. Bonnie.
Now, as you notice,
Very good, very good. I like
he's
that.
using a Scottish accent. He is a performer, when he is in character, he plays a Scottish character. Now, I have, in my past, played a French character and an English character. However, neither one of those accents carries very well over a microphone.
The microphone, you know.
I think so.
Okay.
I could give it a try. Let's see. How do you do? My name is Lady Ursula Stoughton. I'm hostess to Her Highness Marie de Guise. She travels through England. And it does, doesn't it? That's the education. And my very first character, because my husband chose to be a Scotsman, and there was no way I was going to be a Scottish woman, I decided to be French. I took that opportunity to do some research, found out there was a good reason that a Scottish man would be married to a French woman, and so I learned a French accent. It was not the easiest thing in the world, but once you get the hang of it, you just can't stop. We've been doing Renaissance fairs for 10 years now, over 10 years. We began as street performers, which is guerrilla theater. That's not having a play and dialogue, but having an essence of who your character is and being prepared to chat, answer questions, and behave like the character you've done research about. We have progressed from simply street performers to teachers. We've taught acting, we've taught stage presence, we've taught history, I've taught sewing. And now we are in leadership of the RFO, Renaissance Fair in Fayetteville, where he is the entertainment director, I am the costume mistress, and it is our job to take volunteers, teach them everything they need to know to live and breathe and be a historical character for 2 days straight.
Convince everyone that visits to set aside disbelief, just for a little bit, and make them think that they're actually in 1537. and enjoying their time in southern London, southern England. Sorry. And you're actually at a Renaissance fair. So where did Renaissance Fair start?
Thank you so much for jumping to the end of my presentation. I have cards, just in case we didn't have pictures. He asked the question, when did Renaissance fairs start? And Renaissance fairs began in the United States in the early 60s. After World War II, there was a great deal of focus on looking at history in a more positive light, anything that wasn't World War II. And so many public schools began studying the medieval period, the Renaissance period, focusing on the dress, the customs, the interesting historical figures. Hollywood also picked this up. You will notice that most of the films that you see about Henry VIII and Mary Queen of Scots were filmed in the late 50s and the early 60s. We fell in love with the period as a culture. Now, the very first Renaissance fair was not a fair so much as it was an evening get-together for Christmas. A bunch of theater students and professional actors thought, oh, wouldn't this be fun? And it was. It was fun enough that they decided to do it again and allow the public to attend. It was free. Shortly after, this was 1966. Shortly after that, in Southern California, a history teacher, as a school project, had her students put together a Renaissance fair that became the Southern California Pleasure Fair that still exists today. It has gone from being a tiny little get-together where everyone has a funny accent and some leather shoes to a very large event that people travel from around the world to visit. Now, from that, Renaissance fairs have developed and grown and spread. There are Renaissance fairs everywhere in the United States. There are fairs set in the Renaissance period during Henry VIII's reign, fairs set during Queen Elizabeth's reign. But from that, we've branched out into Dickens fairs, into fairs celebrating just about any period of history that people would like to study and recreate. Now, there's a difference in the kinds of fairs that you'll find. In England, you will get mostly historical reenactment, which means they already have the history, they already have the building, so they hire actors, they create period perfect costuming, and then they recreate an actual event. Say the beheading of Anne Boleyn, not the most popular thing, and yet it draws a crowd. They also recreate things like the Battle of Stirling Bridge in Scotland. Many, many events, but their events are fully immersive. Their characters are in clothing made not just out of period-like clothing, but period-specific clothing made with period methods, which means you don't get to use a sewing machine. You are hand stitching and hand carving everything that you wear and use. That is the extreme historical reenactment. The other extreme is the pleasure fair. In the pleasure fair, you won't just find historical characters. You'll also find fairies and wizards and stormtroopers and just about anything, because a pleasure fair embraces and incorporates anything you want to do as an expression of your own interests. Now, the Renaissance fairs, the ones that we are familiar with, falls somewhere between the two. While we strive very much for historical accuracy where possible, we do not require that stitches I will never see be hand sewn, which means that you can use the sewing machine for 90% of what you're wearing and then do the hand stitching for the outside pieces. All of the beading and jewels on my dress, hand stitched. But my skirt with all of those acres and yards of fabric that you do not see, all straight stitched on a machine. Let's see, I've covered that. The difference between...
You can hand that to me.
I couldn't I? Now, the pictures that you're not seeing now, I gave you examples of Roman reenactments, the Battle of Prairie Grove. How many of you have ever been to the Prairie Grove State Park here? They recreate the Battle of Prairie Grove, and when they filmed the miniseries, The Blue and the Gray, they used that site and many of the reenactors to film the Battle of Bull Run. There are reenactors that reenact the Battle of Waterloo. Many battles of World War I and World War II. I have seen a reenactment of the storming of Normandy Beach.
We've seen the Civil War reenactments down in Fort Smith. They have a big Civil War reenactment down in Fort Smith.
I didn't know
On a regular basis. We have several friends that do that reenactment. They do it quite often, different battles around Fort Smith.
Okay.
Oh,
You may have that. Now you have something to do. Now, a Renaissance fair is normally set on a market day or a holiday. It is the time when you are most likely to see travelers and performers in a Renaissance village. Now, oftentimes this means that you will have a figurehead that would never be present in a simple little village like the Henry VIII visiting a town you've never heard of in England. This is what we call fair reality. It's allowing for people who are fabulous and interesting to be involved in places they wouldn't normally be. So you have a day where Henry and his entire court would be seen on the same street with jugglers and dove dealers and, yes, there are dove dealers.
yes.
I say that we try to recreate an entire village. It's not just the court, it's not just the people dressed like this, but entire villages from the baker and the blacksmith all the way to the clergy, school teachers if there are any. Depends on the period.
Mercenaries.
Mercenaries, indeed. We have travelers and visitors from foreign countries that would never be found in an English village, and yet there they are. They learn their language, they learn their history, they learn their costuming, and then they learn their accent. That's going to take a lot out of my...
I have a question. How do you go about recreating accents? I know that where your time you're set is after the vowel shift, so you don't have to worry about that. But historical accents of a baker?
It's sometimes make it up as you go along. There are records, especially for English, where authors try to record how it sounded specifically by creating punctuation, creating words to relay the sound. This is rare though. It's only useful for certain facets of society. So when you are playing a baker, you use your best judgment. You try to use your ear and you do a lot of movie watching. Sure.
I won't try to talk in my accent. It's hard to understand even though the best it is.
My wife mentioned fair reality. With the SCA, where it's very strict period reenactment. With a Renaissance fair, it's fair reality. What the public would expect to hear, what we acknowledge to be acceptable. We don't use Cockney, for example. Cockney is very difficult to understand.
That's the modern English that you would hear on, say, a BBC soap opera.
Call, really. You know, it's like deep Louisiana accent. It's very thick. So we try to keep accents either neutral, where there is no accent at all, or we use a cheater accent, like Shrek or a modern English monarch accent.
The point of it is that when your patron buys a ticket and comes in, they expect to experience a day in Tudor England. And if you sound like you are from Oklahoma or Texas, it's going to throw them right out of that careful fiction that you've built. So even if you can't perfect the accent, even if you aren't historically accurate to the very last syllable, you are enough removed that the essence is there. You feel like you're meeting a historical character, even though there's no way you can test them on their vowel sounds. Our villages are full of performers, stage musicians. Oftentimes you can see Shakespeare being performed for free. We like to include as much as possible the crafting arts. So you see live performances of people weaving, of blacksmiths making weapons and tools, of potters throwing clay in front of you. That doesn't mean that these pieces are going to be perfect, but it may be the only chance that some of our patrons ever have of seeing where these things came from. We spend our day from very early in the morning being our historical characters, talking to each other as if we are villagers. We make the village run. We solve problems, we run tasks, we go to church, we go to court, and we let the public go with us.
And we make knights, and we bow to the queen or the princess, and we have a day of festival. It's a little snapshot of what we think it should be.
But it's like looking through a photo album and picking out the very best events, so that you're having in one day a joust, and a choral performance in the church, and the very best fire breather you can imagine. It wouldn't have happened that way in history, but we're presenting it all in the same day, trying to catch your attention and make your day worthwhile. Now, children oftentimes will leave a Renaissance fair with a wooden sword. We try to make sure that when they have the sword in their hand, they don't just know what it is and what you can do with the sword, but before they walk out of the gates, they also have an understanding of knightly valor. Oh my.
Yeah.
I have pictures.
You will shortly.
This is...
Wonderful. You know, I know that we're going to be talking about the Renaissance Festival and its history. A lot of things go into play when you do a Renaissance Fair. It's just not funny people showing up in clothes. Yes, please.
It's just not funny, people showing up in funny clothes and speaking with a funny accent. There's a lot of training that goes into a Renaissance fair. These people commit months and months. Some fairs have what we call saturation or deep immersion training, where they actually live on site for months at a time and live as their characters live. Sterling, Scarborough Fair in Waxahachie, Texas, both what they call deep immersion fairs, where their cast members live for months on site and live just like their characters do. So when the patrons come in the door, they're so, I hate to say the word brainwashed, they are living their character.
But they take that time away from the cell phone, and as I said, from the plumbing, from the modern conveniences, so that by the time the patron comes in, they are really talking to someone who has slept on a hay bed, used a horse to stay warm, and eaten oatmeal far too many times.
Used a chamber pot, cooked on a fire, no refrigeration, no air conditioning, no electricity. Very, very rudimentary existence.
Okay, so the picture we have here, that is the front gate. Let's see, I'm not sure who has control over
I'll have
the
it.
pictures now.
I can do it.
We really never have control.
They never had control. It's a fantasy. Next.
On the last slide.
Yes, if you want to click through.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
We're professionals, by the way. We're just not professional presenters.
So are we.
That's a permanent stand.
Yes, this building,
There you go.
365 days a year, the buildings are theirs, there's someone on site, but the fair usually only runs during a month, the weekends of it. No, this one is actually in Arizona.
Okay.
The point of this, the lights. The point of this is the buildings here have been built to create the impression of a village. They stand all the time so that when you walk in, you're not seeing tents, you're not seeing sunglasses, you walk from one world into another. It just helps you to live the part, and it helps the audience to see what you're trying to teach them secretly, sneakily. Next. This is Colonial Williamsburg. We were talking about the deep immersion. These people use only period correct tools. If you look, their clothing, the colors, the lines, everything has been researched and is completely correct. If you go to Colonial Williamsburg today, you will find people shoeing horses, churning butter. Next. There's your Roman reenactors. Actually, the very first reenactments were done in the Roman Colosseum, where for the entertainment of the crowd, they would recreate battles, they would recreate stories from their own fiction, from history, from the Bible. Don't tell anyone. Next. Now this is Waterloo. All of these people are there because they want to be. They're not being paid to recreate this. They have to purchase their own costuming, their own weapons, their own shot, sometimes their own fake blood. But they do this because they love it, because they love history. Whether there's an audience or not, you will find them out there shooting at one another. This is World War I, yes. And the next one is actually from Prairie Grove. You may even know some of these people. Now, we're talking about the distinction between pleasure fairs and deep immersion historical reenacting. This is a fairy from a pleasure fair. Look at the next one. Pleasure fair, you're likely to find just about anything. We embrace all interests.
Stormtrooper in a kilt.
Next one.
Baba McFett.
And pirates. There are no pirates in the Renaissance era. There were people who had boats and stole things from you at gunpoint, but most of them were Irish, most of them were barefoot, most of them were very, very poorly dressed. None of them had snazzy hats. There were no pirate lingos. Now the Renaissance fairs that we are most familiar with ride that middle line between the two, where you try to recreate the past in essence, but you may not necessarily get all of the details correct. The point is that when you bring your children in and we can talk to you about what we know, I can tell you how to dye something, where the dye comes from, how long it takes to dye it, how bad it smells, and how long you can wear it before you have to dye it again. So, next one. Now, this is my list of things that you're likely to find at a Renaissance fair. This is an actor performing King Lear at a Renaissance fair taking place before King Lear actually was written. That, however, does not stop what he's doing being useful, being entertaining, and being likely to make a child go home and figure out who King Lear is. If for nothing else, that hair. Next one. Our stages, we have musicians playing traditional instruments, but also playing modern instruments, guitars that have not been imported into Europe yet. Next one. We have jousting. Now, if you look at this, they're wearing medieval style armor. By the time of the Renaissance period of Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth, jousting had gone by the wayside. There were no knights walking around in armor ever. However, to entertain the king, and because the king enjoyed doing it himself, they kept armor, they kept horses, and they would have spring fairs of their own where they would dress up in historical costume and hit each other with sticks. There's a long tradition of historical reenactment. Now this is a falconer. One of the things that a Renaissance fair actually does for the world around it is that many of these birds are endangered, and this is an education program. You not only see the birds performing, but you get to be close to them and see that they are real, live animals with feelings. You also, if you donate to their cause, it goes to the care and feeding, the preservation of their area. The falconry pays back by going to schools and teaching, but also by keeping nature alive. They put the money back into making sure there are places for wild birds. Next.
A question.
Oh, yes.
Would a woman have been a falconer in the 16th century, or is that one of the concessions you made?
That is pretty much a concession. Now, while women would have been involved, they would not have been presenting to the public or to the court. Women were more functionary than they were presentable, unless their job was to be presentable, and then they'd never be touching animals. Now, this is a blacksmith. Not only is he a blacksmith, he's a Scotsman and a blacksmith.
Of course he is.
You can see an arrangement of tools in front of him. They do build tools during the day, tongs and spoons. Now the fork for us is a new invention. It's kind of a curiosity. We don't know how to use it because during the Tudor era, we ate with our fingers and other people's fingers sometimes. But the fork was a curiosity and a toy. Okay? Another one of the vendors, oftentimes you're finding these things be beautiful in a fairy's hair, not appropriate for me, and yet I will buy one because it's shiny and pretty. And by buying it, I am supporting the artisan who at home creates these things. None of our vendors, usually not any of the Renaissance Fair vendors, are corporately owned. They're not buying their merchandise from China. They are creating it themselves, spending a lot of time and effort and love to produce merchandise so that we have not necessarily historically accurate, but certainly historical goods to purchase. Yeah. Here we are, pottery. Renaissance food. She's holding in her hand a turkey leg. I apologize. The turkey is not a European creature. It is a New World creature. It has only recently been introduced in my time. However, you will go to a Renaissance fair, every single fair will have at least one turkey leg dealer because that came from the movies. A long time ago, in the 50s, they decided that the only reason that Henry VIII was big was because he had big food to eat. It had visual impact, and from that point forward, poor Henry has had to eat turkey legs. Because Henry, in movies and television, ate turkey legs, we now have turkey legs too.
Corn on the cob wouldn't have been around either.
No pumpkins, no potatoes, all of the things we have for Thanksgiving.
They would have cake and leg, though.
Yes.
Yeah, they would have cake, they would be
Yes.
bigger, yeah.
During the Tudor era, you would not have eaten beef or chicken quite so much because these animals you have use for. Beef, you're getting calves, you're getting milk, you're going to need that cow to stay alive. So instead of eating your lifestyle animals, you're doing a lot more hunting. We would eat rabbit, we would eat duck, we would eat pigeon, we would eat almost anything else but chicken, pork, and beef. Stage act. Yes. Not a common habit during the Tudor era. Very, very popular stage act at a Renaissance fair. Can we get this one? These are skill games. Now, skill games you would have found in a Tudor village anyway, because this is throwing axes and throwing knives. Now, they've added throwing stars, which is something that we won't come in contact with for quite some time. Not until Elizabeth has ships that sail to the Orient will we see throwing stars. But creatively, we have incorporated them because children like to throw them. They may look sharp, they're not dangerous. This is actually archery for children. This is not only teaching aim and focus, but sneaking in to this conversation, he's also teaching him where the crossbow came from, what it was used for, how long it took to get from the simple bow and arrow through the longbow to the crossbow. The child will walk away knowing more than he did without even realizing it. The maypole. Most of the fairs you will find are based in early spring. Whether during the month of May or not, they will all include a maypole. Now, this harkens back to pre-Christian customs. The maypole was a celebration of spring. It was also the time where young couples, married or not, would find each other and repopulate. But the dancing, the bright colors, the weaving of the ribbon, all of it was symbolic. And we are encouraged not to teach the children about this part so much. I have had classes come to me, and the teacher has prepared them to ask me this question to hear how I will answer it. Because in this day and age, you have to have a PC answer. Why, yes, the pole is a phallic symbol. No, I cannot tell you what a phallic symbol means. This is a cobbler's stall, making shoes in front of you. Not all of the vendors selling shoes make the shoes in front of you. Some of them honestly have to take it back to their workshops and use their modern tools because you're going to want to wear these shoes more than once. This is a weaver. Now this is a modern cloth. This is a modern loom. However, the fact that they are weaving in front of an audience gets the idea across. Now you can't see, but on the other side, and I don't have any good pictures of her, is a lady using a spinning wheel. On the other side of her, sitting on the floor, is a young girl who is wrapping wool into a ball. They go through the entire course of carding the wool and turning it into thread all the way to weaving it in front of you. This is time-consuming and tedious work, and yet they do it for free so that someone, for the first time, will see where clothing comes from. Now, how I got started, that is me. That is my lovely husband and my lovely daughter 10 years ago. I got involved with this because one Mother's Day, they bought tickets and took me to the Renaissance Fair. I'd never heard of the Renaissance Fair. Now, we're going to go to the next one. We rented those costumes, by the way. I went home, I said I can do better than that, so I taught myself how to sew, and we joined the cast. Because while we were there, all of the street performers, all of the stage performers treated us like we were one of them. They answered all my questions. They complimented me on my rented gown as if it were actually mine. They created a sense of welcome and inclusion and information. I didn't realize just how much I had learned until I realized how much more I needed to learn to get here. Now, Don and I teach academies for RFO. We teach not just history. We encourage you to do your research, to read your history books. We also teach stage presence, public speaking, comedy timing. We help people who are shy and unsure, who have never been in front of a crowd before, to feel comfortable telling a joke, to walk up to a stranger and introduce themselves. We, in a very subtle way, by preparing them for the Renaissance Fair, are actually preparing them for their college careers, for their business careers, for real life. Because once you're past the fear of strangers, once you're past the fear of not being good enough, you can do anything. Now, what is this? Oh, there we are. Now, what we do is we teach. This is us teaching during a fair day. This is actually on a live chessboard where they swing steel at one another, but it's based on an event in history. This one, I think they were arguing about taxes, English taxes, where the sailors didn't want to pay them. The Scotsmen certainly didn't want to pay them. Our wenches and bartenders did not want to pay them. And yet by the end of the chessboard, the audience knew what the tax was for and why they were all going to pay it anyway. Now this is me talking to a young patron. In this event, we were actually talking about where his hat came from and why he is dressed as a chevalier. He, having been there once, dressed in a rayon Halloween costume, talked about French history, talked about what it was, the difference between a French knight and an English knight, went home and decided that his mom needed to make him this outfit so that he could be a French knight. Now, granted, this is a 17th century knight, but now, this is Don at Springdale High School, where we go and spend a day talking about living history with students. We've gone to grade schools, middle schools, high schools. They ask us questions. Sometimes they ask us the most embarrassing, most awful question they can think of because they think we won't know or because they think it might embarrass us. I talk about torture. I talk about bathroom habits. I talk about plumbing not being a thing. By the end of the day, they know more about Tudor history than they will ever learn from a book because it was their question, not what I was trying to present to them, that will stick in their mind. This is us teaching classes, preparing our actors to go out on the street and be silly and larger than life to draw your attention. Now, what the Ren Fair does for the community. This is from a food drive. We spend a lot of time appearing at events, helping people to raise money for charities, for firemen's funds, for families that have lost homes or have had injuries. We do collect. We also have raffles, silent auctions. We make things ourselves and sell them. You can go to the next one. Now, another thing that the Renaissance Fair does, because we already have our costumes, because we already know what we're doing and where we are in society, we are often hired to be in the background of television, of local films, and even of Hollywood films. You go to the next one. You may not realize this. I know how many of you have even seen the other Boleyn Girl? All right. There are a lot of Arkansans in the court along the wall. Now, this is a very large cast. The question is, who does this? What kind of people dress up like this? And I'll tell you the truth. It's volunteers, it's doctors, lawyers, history buffs, hippies, college dropouts,
Business professionals.
Boy Scouts, everyone,
moms, sisters.
everyone gets involved.
And librarians too.
Oh, we love librarians.
Librarians. One thing that my lovely wife did not share is that Renaissance fairs consume a lot of resources, causing spending. They invite a lot of people. Average for the festival that we were members of for over 10 years, 10,000 people a weekend came through our gate.
So that's hotel rooms, that's
People from out of
restaurants, that's
town,
gas station
Oklahoma
stuff.
City, from all over the country. We even had patrons that came in from Scotland, flew in from Edinburgh to see us, to spend the weekend or a couple of weeks in our fair. That's a lot of revenue to your city. If you're a small town, the one that we come from, that's a lot of cash coming in the door. And over the last 20 years, that fair's made quite a name for itself in the community.
But at the same time, donating to schools, book drives, donating to children's hospitals. The money that comes in goes back out into the community. Now, as I said before, that's also all of those visitors have to buy gas, they have to buy lunch, they stay over in motels. That is revenue generated all the way around the Renaissance Fair, not just at the fair. Yeah.
We have, currently this year at the Renaissance Fair in the Ozarks, we have over 40 vendors selling their wares at our fair. Last year we had 25.
And these are local people making things in their homes and their garages.
Nothing is store-bought, everything is handmade. From the pottery to the knives and swords they sell, to the cloaks they make and sell. They all make it at home. It's all home industry. They're going to be staying here for the weekend, and that means they're going to be staying in hotels. We have local companies providing food, tents.
Yes?
I mean, the influx of these fairs and festivals to our community is huge. And the more they're around, the longer they're here, the better the local economy benefits from it.
So I think I've hit all the highlights of my pictures. I think I've hit all of the highlights of my notes. So why don't we open up the floor to questions? Anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Yes.
I seem to be asking all the questions, but I'm really interested. The Ren Fair of the Ozarks now, how long have you been there?
This is our 6th year. This is, our second year of being involved with it.
And where is it, and when?
It is in April 18th and 19th. It's on the Washington County Fairgrounds.
Oh,
They have not yet grown to the point of building their own site, but that is part of the plan. The longer you can keep a fair alive, the longer you can create that relationship with the community, then you can find property, you can start building the village. You have something to add?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We are currently focused in the city of Fayetteville. We have found a very warm welcome in the city of Rogers.
Yes.
Our desire in the future is to move the fair from Fayetteville to Benton County, preferably Rogers. I think it would be, we all think, and I'm on the board of directors as well, we all think there would be a better move for the fair and for the city of Rogers to have us here.
Because I really like
A lot of things go on in Fayetteville.
out there.
We get ignored sometimes because of the grand things, bikes, blues, and barbecue, and other events that outshadow us. We tend to be forgotten.
Well, that's
Between-
something to think about. We are much, much quieter than bikes.
Yes, we are. And we're much better well behaved, and we're cleaner.
Well,
Well, we don't make a lot of
we
noise.
wash our hands.
This year, we partnered with the library, Rogers Public Library, and they've been very, very helpful, supportive. We have a place to hold our training academies.
Yes, last year we did our academies at the park.
In
I
Johnson
don't know if
County.
you've been outside during February
In
and
Johnson.
March. It's chilly in Arkansas in February. So we love the library.
Last year, we had a street presence, we call it, that's our street cast, a street presence of 6 people. That's me, my wife, our princess, her knights and guards, a total of 6 people. This year, we have over 30.
Wow.
That's how much we've grown in just 1 year. We went
Because
from,
they came, they liked what they saw, they liked talking with us, and they wanted to be part of it. And we welcome them in. It doesn't matter what they know how to do, if they don't know how to do anything at all. And some of our new cast members are very young students. They know nothing. They want to know it all, and we help them. Now, we have also cast members who have come in who have been doing this for years. They know how to make their own clothing. We don't need to teach them anything. We welcome them too.
we went from having 25 vendors to 40. We went from having 5 stage acts to over 15 stage acts. And that's not counting the jousting troupe that we have this year.
We will have jousting in Fayetteville for the first time.
The face of the fair has changed completely in just 2 years. And we expect additional growth going forward. Eventually, we're going to outgrow our venue.
You're going to do banquets with wine and bubbles?
Yes.
The plan, thank you, the plan for this year, we are planning a 12th night in January to help fund our upcoming year.
Roasted quail.
Now, she suggested roasted quail.
I
Roasted
did.
quail was also suggested for the menu. Our menu is still up in the air.
Yep.
Where are you having the 12th night?
Well, tentatively here.
Oh,
Potentially in.
It's still
It's one of
early
those
in
things
the
we're
plan,
throwing out
yes.
there.
But we would like to do a 12th night and invite everybody in the city of Rogers to attend. The menu's still up in the air. Once the fair opens in April, hopefully we'll have most of the groundwork laid, where we'll know what we're serving and how many people we can actually have. Just more the merrier. But that's upcoming events.
Now in Rogers, if you're looking for a space, are you including parking, and is it permanent, and are you going to rent it out to other activities and stuff?
At this time, we are still renting from others. When we develop a permanent site, yes, absolutely. Parking is part of the initial planning, and once permanent buildings are created, there's no reason that we couldn't rent them out for birthday parties or weddings or that sort of thing.
Sites, for example, we use Scarborough Fair in Waxahachie, Texas, the Texas Renaissance Fair outside of Houston, Muskogee, Oklahoma. Their site, their village, Muskogee, for example, 60-plus acres of village, hard buildings, 2-story buildings with roads. They have a 33,000 square foot castle
Which used to be an Elks Lodge.
Yeah, now it's built like a castle.
Was there over there, they had elephants here with elephant rides.
Yes, they do. Waxahachie, they have over 70 acres in their village. Kansas City, 80 acres. That's not counting the parking. They have parking at least twice the size of the village because you have so many people coming through. Those are old fairs. I believe that Scarborough just passed their 38th year. Muskogee is 20 years old. Kansas City's 39. St. Louis is 25.
So we have some growing to do.
You know, we've been going to Muskogee as patrons and cast members since 1997. And we've learned a lot and brought a lot with us to help teach the Renaissance Fair of the Ozarks. We would like to see them have their 20th anniversary here in Rogers. And that's what we're shooting for.
We have musicians with flutes and fiddles and all the
Yes.
old-fashioned notes.
I don't know if we have a flautist, but I know that we have a harpist. We have at least one flamenco guitarist. We have, yes?
We have a flutist, Turtle and Hare.
Oh, we do have a flautist, excellent.
Yeah. The Turtle plays.
And she plays a cello as well.
She plays the cello and flute. I'm going to go
No,
off.
you go right ahead. You're doing very well.
Yes, sir.
Talk about the 12th night, what about the, what is the one that known as in the fall, the big dinner, the big display? What do you call that?
Well, it's also called the Renaissance.
Is it Kansas City you're talking
No,
about?
no, it's all,
We have, I know we in Muskogee have a boar-set feast in the fall.
it's called something else, but it's,
The Oktoberfest, though.
yeah, but,
That's usually a little more modern.
yeah, no, they go in costumes and, I think, well,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of the name, I'm sorry, brother.
No,
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 you're
that's
fine,
fine.
you're fine.
When you remember, you tell me and I'll write it down.
Because I also am the entertainment director for a Halloween festival. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about character development. If you work one of the shows, are your characters truly historically based, or the characters are just historically correct, or both?
They can be. My character, for example, Laird McCrae, is a real character. My family name is McCrae.
He
And
looked up his ancestors
I went through
and
all
rounded
types of
them out.
history on my character. So my character is, her character, Lady McCrae, Jeanette de Leon McCrae.
She's an extrapolation of what is likely to be there, but she is not based on any
Yeah.
one person.
We have a mixture of both, like Marie de Guy, she is a real character.
A real historical figure.
We have another character, Sir Francis Bryan. He's a real character. So we have a mixture of both. Most of your villagers are usually made up to fit the village and fit the scenario.
Because it's a volunteer environment, because you have people from one end of the acting ability and finance scale to the other, you want to get people focused where they are best suited. So for casting Queen Elizabeth, you would want someone not only who can do the history, but can live the history, looks the part, and can afford the dress. That narrows down your search a little. But for your baker, since it's not based on any one person, there's a lot more leeway. So they can make a character of their own, a creation of their own, and focus more on having their baking techniques be period correct.
You'll also find where there's the towns where there are Renaissance fairs, Hancock fabric thrives. Because you don't buy this stuff off the rack. So yeah.
So that's one of the things that I learned having done this. I learned to sew. Now, I took home ec in high school. I learned how to make an apron, and I was done. And we rented costuming once. To my mind, rented costuming is just not good because it's one size fits all, and it really didn't fit.
I was wearing Byzantine armor, slop pants, socks, sandals, and a leather headband.
He was a Roman ninja.
I was so period inappropriate, and I was carrying a rapier sword. So like, I was a mixed mash, but I had fun.
So we went home, we did our homework, we did the research. I learned what was right, I learned how to make it, and it will happen to other people too.
You're fooling other people all the time.
And the funny thing about it is when we started doing this in 1997, I really thought my daughter, she costumed everything. She had my wife making costumes for her all the time. We thought she would just embrace this and run with it. She ran so far away from it, that she was on fire.
She spent 1 year as a pirate and then decided that perhaps she wanted to be a glam rocker instead.
I think it's because mom and dad did it. It was so,
And once you discover David Bowie, there's just no going back.
Any other questions? Please.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
How long does the Renaissance Fair run in Fayetteville?
18th and 19th of April, we're a one-weekend fair.
But it's our 6th year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My second year as entertainment director.
But don't feel bad if you haven't heard about it, because it began very, very small.
Yeah.
I think we're changing that now. Next year, we're having elephants.
Let's give them a big, oh, what's the question?
I was just going to ask you, if you're looking at Rogers, are you working with the mayor and
Yes.
people who care?
Yes.
We have spoken, actually, we
Because
spoke.
it was the mayor who said, have you been out to War Eagle?
They actually pointed us to War
Yes,
Eagle,
now I
which I'm
know. It's lovely out there, and we could work that out.
And actually-
Natural setting.
Actually, I would personally kill for a lakeside Renaissance
Oh,
fair.
my goodness.
I'm
We
very,
could have
I'm very
even bogey
fond of Beaver Lake, and I would just fall over myself to find property right on the edge of Beaver Lake. That would be so beautiful.
So I hope that we taught you a little bit about the Renaissance Fair, opened you up to things that you didn't realize. I know that oftentimes Renaissance fairs are the butt of the joke. We accept that because we teach our cast members to be the joke,
That's
to
right.
lose big. It makes the patron feel smart and funny and clever. And so we don't mind if you stick it behind our backs that
We
we're in
encourage
funny
it, actually.
costumes.
Can we find you online?
You absolutely can.
My card.
Yes, we have cards.
I have a card. I have a card.
But
But I don't have pockets.
the
So
Renaissance
it's hard.
Fair of the Ozarks has a website. And many of our characters have developed cast pages that talk about ourselves, put pictures of ourselves up on Facebook. We interact as our characters.